जब शाहजहां ने दिल्ली बनवाया करीब 350 साल पहले, सुना है कि वो चढ़े इनके ऊपर जामा मस्जिद पे, तो उनको अंदाज नहीं होगा कि दिल्ली का ये हाल होगा 350 साल बाद. Because this was a world city at one point of time. The interesting thing, of course, if you turn around from that tower and you look at something else, an image that we are all very familiar with, the image that many of us have grown up with, the ramparts of the Red Fort, where the Prime Minister gives his speech on the 15th of August. The thing about this image is it has a number of hidden elements in it. Of course, there's both Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb in the front, but the more interesting thing in some ways is this, 1857. These are buildings which the British left here, which are now heritage buildings. And then you have the metro and sort of post-colonial India in the background. So I guess the challenge of our contemporary cities is the integration of all these, the pre-colonial, the colonial, the modern, and something which I suspect many prime ministers don't see because they don't turn around and they don't know what's happening behind Red Fort. और मैं आपको एक चीज़ दिखाऊंगा जो कई लोगों को पता नहीं है. वो एक जगह थी जिसका नाम था यमुना पुश्ता. This was Yamuna Pushta in 2003 और 2004 में ये हुआ था. Yamuna Pushta was entirely destroyed. A very large active settlement in which almost a lakh of people were employed and lived and functioned was erased from the map. This is what it looked like before the erasure, and thankfully to satellite mapping, we know what it looks like now. It's gone. Urban exclusion, to answer one of the questions that we talked about, the question of jobs is obviously central, but there is a process of exclusion which is systematic and organized and structured. It's not only a facet of India's historical socio-economic asymmetries, it could be an unintended outcome of state policy and legality. The journey towards inclusive growth in our cities and our villages, because we are tied together in one continuum, starts with the responsiveness to the letter and the spirit of the Indian Constitution. I think that's one thing we often forget, and I would really like to underline this. I think this is the spirit in which we want to hold this debate, and this is the spirit in which I will show you the evidence that we're going to see. We have 3 cities with a population of 10 million, 53 with more than 1 million. So I go toggle back before that. That's an order of magnitude shift in those numbers that you see there. The 833 million people who live in 0.64 million villages. This is actually one of the most interesting conundrums that we have. We have 8,000 urban centers, but we have 640,000 villages. And in fact, the essential challenge that we have is to manage this large and very diverse settlement structure that's very concentrated at the top end, but has an extremely long tail. The question for us, I guess, is what's going to happen in 2031? Now, the key question, which I think we often miss, is how many Indians will live in medium and small towns? And that is the missing middle, both on the employment side and on the economic structure side. And that I think is one of the core questions that we're trying to address here, because it is a bridge between rural and urban India as this transformation takes place that is missing. And if we don't address that bridge, we're in fairly desperate trouble. The top 10 cities in 2011 produced 15% of the GDP. This is an estimate. 8% of the population using only 0.1% of the land area. There's a huge political contention now on the questions of land and how land will be managed and how it will be acquired. This is an important number to get a sense of. We've just brought it off the press literally a week back. 0.1% of the land area hosts 8% of the population, produce 15% of the output. The top 100 cities, 0.25% roughly of land area, 16% of the population, but 43% of the GDP. This is an important thing to get a sense of. The immense spatial concentration of productivity, let's say, of output is very, very significant in India today. So if we have urban areas producing about 60+% of the GDP, you have the top 100 cities producing 43%, the other 7,900 producing another 20%, and another 640,000 producing the other 40%. That spatial distribution is something that we really have to understand. This looks at all the states in India and where the flows take place. So for example, this is Bihar. 20 migration flows make up 50% of the migration into urban areas in the country. So this is the flow from Bihar. This is a flow of people from Uttar Pradesh into Delhi. What you see, and as I showed you earlier, a tremendous flow of people into Delhi, into other states. And contrary to other expectations, if I look at Maharashtra here, the flows from Maharashtra, from UP into Maharashtra, and from, let's say, other states into Maharashtra are relatively low. This is the structure of India's settlements across the whole country, both rural and urban, over the last 50 years. We normally talk only of urban, and let me give you how it is. So basically, at the current point of time, there are about 265 million people in the 1 lakh plus towns, that is the class 1 towns. There are about 112 million people in urban areas. You add that 2 up and you get the 377 that I was talking about. And then there are also 200 million people in large villages. That is villages of 5,000 and 10,000 population size and above that. And then of course you have about 537 million people in medium and smaller villages, all from 500 and upwards. Now this is very important to get a sense of. 265 in the 1 lakh plus, 112 in the other urban centers, 200 million people in the large villages. That is your definition of urbanization. That's where we are at 30%, contrarian to where the world has been in Latin America, etc., etc. The big question for us, of course, is the gray zone between these two lines. The bulk of the output is concentrated in the areas where large-scale urbanization, investment, and wealth are. We are where we were in some senses in the 1990s. So liberalization has actually led not only to increasing Gini and sort of an exclusion economically, but the spatial concentrations are very, very disturbing. And I think agriculture, of course, you can see, and you can see the green revolution areas and the commercial agricultural areas in 2005. In Maharashtra, you can see Nasik, you can see Baramati, Pune, etc., etc. But the thing that really disturbed me was when I looked at the manufacturing output distribution. And this is a huge challenge because there's a large part of India in which manufacturing is just not happening as it should, because that's what, and we can see that from the merchandise trade deficit with China, with the rest of the world, including China, that's there. So this is one of our core challenges. Real estate, of course, is concentrated in particular areas. The other thing that really disturbed us, of course, was a recent paper that emerged, that came out earlier this year, which looked at the wealth distribution by caste. This is reprocessing the 2002 All India Destined Investment Survey. This looks at the wealth distribution by caste, so you can see it going down from scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, all the way down to the forward castes. Now, this is the standard distribution you see in rural areas. But the thing that really disturbs some of us, Baba Sahib ne bola tha ki if you come to the cities, things will change. But what we're finding is the caste distribution that we find in rural India is being reproduced in urban India. And this is a matter of considerable concern. This means that not only is economic disparities growing, that concentration is actually happening in particular places as we experience 6.5% per capita GDP growth, but some of the social stratification that we're experiencing are happening. If 60% or plus of your GDP is going to be coming from urban areas, you might be slightly underinvested. So there may be some corrections that maybe have to be made here. So thank you very much.